The last time I saw my father alive, he handed me an old brass key. He smiled, closed my fingers around it, and said, "Not everything valuable fits inside a bank account." At the time, I thought he was talking about memories. 3 weeks after his funeral, I realized he had been warning me about my own family. My name is Daniel Carter. I'm 41 years old, and I teach history at a public high school in Columbus, Ohio. My father, Richard Carter, spent 40 years building one of the most respected commercial construction companies in central Ohio. He wasn't flashy. He drove the same pickup truck for 15 years and still mowed his own lawn every Saturday. He believed character mattered more than money. Unfortunately, not everyone in my family believed the same thing. My older brother, Michael, had always measured success by what people could see. Expensive suits. Luxury vacations. A new car every other year. He liked being the center of attention, and Dad tolerated it because he hoped maturity would eventually catch up with him. It never did. Dad's funeral was beautiful. Friends, former employees, neighbors, and veterans he had quietly supported over the years filled the church. Listening to them speak, I realized how many lives he had changed without ever asking for recognition. But while everyone else was remembering the man we had lost, Michael seemed unusually interested in what came next. Even before the reception ended, he leaned toward our mother. "We should schedule the attorney as soon as possible," he whispered. He didn't realize I heard him. Mom simply nodded. Something about the exchange made my stomach tighten. 3 days later, we gathered in the office of Olivia Bennett, Dad's estate attorney. The conference room overlooked downtown Columbus, but no one paid attention to the view. Michael immediately took control of the conversation. "Dad wanted this handled efficiently," he said, sliding a stack of papers toward me. "Let's not drag this out." Olivia looked uncomfortable. "I'd prefer everyone review each document carefully." Michael laughed. "It's straightforward." He looked directly at me. "Daniel, you trust the family, don't you?" It wasn't really a question. I'd barely slept since the funeral. My mind was still filled with memories of Dad sitting on the porch drinking coffee, asking about my students, teasing me for being the only history teacher who hated grading essays. The legal language blurred together. Michael pointed where I should sign. Mom quietly avoided eye contact. Emily, my younger sister, sat silently with folded arms. I signed. By the end of the meeting, it seemed almost everything significant belonged to Mom and Michael. The business. Most investment accounts. Several commercial properties. I received Dad's old pickup truck, a modest savings account, and a few personal belongings. It didn't make sense. Dad believed in fairness. Not equal outcomes. Fairness. He would never have reduced me to an afterthought. Still, grief has a way of making you question yourself before you question the people you love. As we left the office, I heard Michael chuckle. That went easier than I expected. Those 6 words stayed with me all week. I tried convincing myself I was imagining things. Maybe Dad really had changed his mind. Maybe he believed I was happier teaching than running a business. Maybe. The phone rang 8 days later. It was Olivia. "Daniel, could you come by my office this afternoon?" Her voice sounded different. Careful. Measured. When I arrived, she placed a large cream-colored envelope on the table. Across the front, in my father's unmistakable handwriting, were the words, "To be opened only after my estate meeting has concluded." Olivia looked genuinely puzzled. She carefully opened the envelope and unfolded several handwritten pages. "I think your father wanted everyone present for this." The following morning, my family returned to the same conference room. Michael looked irritated. "What is this about?" Olivia didn't answer immediately. Instead, She began reading. "If you're hearing this letter," she read, "then my family has already met to divide what they believe is my estate." The room became perfectly still. "I have spent my life studying buildings. The strongest foundations aren't tested during sunshine. They're tested during storms. Families are no different." I felt chills run down my arms. "Dad always joked like that," Emily whispered. Olivia continued. "If everything happened exactly as I instructed, then wonderful. But if Daniel is sitting quietly while others are making decisions for him, then I fear my concerns were justified." Michael shifted in his chair. His confidence faded just enough for me to notice. "I've watched subtle changes over the past 5 years," Olivia read. "I've seen conversations stop when Daniel enters the room. I've noticed pressure placed on your mother. I've heard assumptions about who deserves what simply because of birth order." Michael interrupted. "This is ridiculous." Olivia calmly continued reading. "I intentionally separated significant portions of my estate from my primary will." Michael's face lost color. "The true ownership documents, trust agreements, partnership transfers, and succession instructions are secured elsewhere." Olivia opened a second folder. "I received these yesterday morning from Mr. Carter's financial trustee after verifying the conditions described in the letter." She laid several documents across the table. One by one. The construction company wasn't part of the estate we'd signed. Neither were the commercial buildings. Nor the largest investment accounts. Months before his death, Dad had legally transferred them into a private trust. Its successor trustee was me. Michael stared at the papers as though they were written in another language. "No." Olivia nodded. "Everything was properly executed over a year ago." Michael's voice rose. "He can't do that. He already did." Silence filled the room. Olivia resumed reading Dad's letter. "If you're angry, ask yourself why. I never intended to punish anyone. But leadership is earned through integrity, not entitlement." Then came the sentence I'll never forget. "Daniel has never once asked me for money. He asked for advice. He visited because he loved me, not because he expected something in return." My eyes blurred with tears. I remembered every Sunday afternoon we'd spent fixing old furniture in his garage. Every baseball game. Every conversation after Mom went to bed. He had noticed all of it. He had always been paying attention. Michael slammed his hands onto the table. "This is manipulation." "No," Olivia replied quietly. "This is estate planning." Emily finally spoke. "Michael, did you know about any of this?" He didn't answer. That silence answered everything. Mom began crying. "I thought," she whispered. "I thought your father wanted Michael to handle everything." Olivia gently slid another page toward her. Richard had left Mom a handwritten note. It thanked her for decades of love. It also explained that allowing Michael complete financial control would eventually divide the family. He had hoped she would recognize that before it was too late. She covered her face. "I'm so sorry, Daniel." For the first time since Dad died, I believed she meant it. The following weeks were difficult. Attorneys corrected ownership records. Trust assets transferred exactly as Dad intended. Michael challenged everything. Every challenge failed. The documents were meticulous. Dad had anticipated every possible argument. Eventually, Michael stopped calling. Emily reached out first. She admitted she'd ignored warning signs because it was easier than confronting her older brother. Healing wasn't immediate. But honesty finally had room to exist. A month later, I unlocked Dad's old workshop with the brass key he'd given me before he died. Inside were shelves of carefully labeled woodworking projects we'd never finished together. On the workbench sat one final envelope. Inside was a single photograph of the two of us building a birdhouse when I was 8 years old. On the back, Dad had written, "The greatest inheritance I can leave you isn't what I built. It's knowing you'll build something better." I stood there for a long time, surrounded by the smell of sawdust and cedar. The business eventually became my responsibility, but I didn't quit teaching immediately. Instead, I hired experienced managers while learning the company the same way Dad had taught me everything else. One lesson at a time. Every major decision began with a simple question. What would Dad do? Not because he was perfect, but because he understood something many wealthy people never learn. Money reveals character. It doesn't create it. Today, Michael and I rarely speak. Emily visits often. Mom still struggles with regret, but she's trying. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't forgetting what happened. It's refusing to let someone else's greed decide who you become. Every year on my father's birthday, I drive his old pickup to the cemetery carrying fresh flowers. I tell him about my students. About the company. About the family we're slowly rebuilding. Then I thank him. Not for the money. Not for the business. But for believing that honesty would outlast betrayal. In the end, my family thought they had stolen my inheritance. The truth was, they had only taken the part my father expected them to see. The real inheritance was hidden in his wisdom, protected by his foresight, and entrusted to the one thing he believed could never be forged. Character.